"Sir, would you like me to light the candles for you?" The girl was wearing the restaurant's black vest uniform, a lighter in her hand as she stood beside my table. Her voice was soft. I responded without looking up, my eyes still fixed on my phone. The last message in the chat window was from Hannah. "Gideon, something came up at the last minute. Go ahead and celebrate your birthday on your own tonight. Grant's not doing too well right now. I'm going to stay with him for a while. I'll make it up to you when I get back." Time, 9:17 p.m. Sent 3 minutes ago. The waitress placed the candles into the cake and gently reminded me, "Sir, the candles are almost burned down." Only then did I snap back to reality. I glanced at the number on the cake, 28. Kind of ironic. I stared at the 2 tiny flames and suddenly let out a laugh. "Tell me," I asked her, "does celebrating your birthday alone even count as celebrating?" She was visibly caught off guard, probably not expecting me to start a conversation. After a 2-second pause, she answered, "Of course it counts. A birthday is something you celebrate for yourself." I nodded without saying anything. She glanced at the empty seat across from me and carefully asked, "Would you like me to sing happy birthday for you?" "It's free," she quickly added. That made me laugh. I waved my hand. "No need. Just do me a favor." "Sure. If I forget to blow out the candles later, remind me." She nodded. "Okay." I looked back at my phone and replied to Hannah with a single word, "Okay." Then I turned off the screen and sat before a table full of food that had already gone cold. For the first time, I seriously thought about a question. What exactly am I still holding onto in this relationship? Chapter 1. I had been with Hannah for 4 years. In those 4 years, the sentence she said to me most often was, "Don't overthink it. Grant is just a childhood friend." She said it so naturally that it sounded like a catchphrase. So naturally that, later on, whenever I heard those words, my stomach would tighten on reflex. Grant had been her classmate in elementary school, her desk mate in middle school, in the class next door during high school, and then went abroad for college. In short, he had been part of the first half of her life. I'll admit that at first, I genuinely didn't mind. Who doesn't have a friend they grew up with? The problem was this. How should the priority between a friend and a boyfriend be ranked? The day Grant returned to the country, it was pouring outside. Hannah and I were sitting in the back seat of a car. The windshield wipers swept back and forth, but the glass was still blurred by sheets of rain. Her phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID, and her eyes lit up instantly. "Hello, Grant. You've arrived. Stay where you are. I'm coming to pick you up right now." After hanging up, she turned to me, her tone unusually gentle. "Gideon, could you get out and take a taxi home? Grant's situation is urgent. He has a lot of luggage and doesn't know the area very well." The driver glanced at me through the rearview mirror. Even his expression seemed embarrassed on my behalf. I looked at her for 2 seconds and nodded. "Sure." She froze for a moment, probably not expecting me to agree so easily. "You're not upset? Didn't you say it was urgent?" The car pulled over. I opened the door and stepped out. The rain slammed directly into my face. My shirt was soaked through in less than 3 seconds. She rolled the window down halfway and added, "Don't overthink it. I'll call you as soon as I'm done." I smiled. "Okay, go take care of it." The car drove away. I stood by the roadside as rain poured down as if someone were dumping buckets of water from the sky. Across the street, a neon sign flashed, 24-hour noodle house. Without hesitation, I walked over. Just as the bowl of beef noodles was set in front of me, my phone lit up again. Hannah had texted, "Did you get home? Don't catch a cold from the rain." I stared at the message and suddenly didn't know how to respond. In the end, I replied with a single word, "Home." She immediately sent back, "Good," followed by a sun emoji. I stared at that smiling icon and suddenly felt how absurd it all was. You see, it wasn't that she didn't care about me. It was just that she would go pick up Grant first, and care about me afterward. From that day on, a lot of things started to feel increasingly natural. "Gideon, Grant just rented a place. Can you help him figure out the internet setup?" "Gideon, you're good at making PowerPoints. Can you help him review his presentation deck?" At first, I would still ask, "Why don't you do it yourself?" Later, I couldn't even be bothered to ask, because the answer was always the same. "I'm too busy right now. You're passing by there anyway, aren't you? What's wrong with helping him out?" The worst part was that when she said those things, she genuinely believed there was nothing wrong with them. Sometimes I felt like I was nothing more than a tool whose presence made things more exciting for the two of them. Chapter 2. On my birthday, Hannah had promised she'd be off work by 6. I had booked the restaurant 2 days in advance, picking dishes she liked. Even the cake was from her favorite place, low sugar, to avoid giving her a burden if she ate too much at night. 5:40 p.m., she sent a message. "Almost there." 6:20 p.m., "Something came up last minute. You go ahead and start." 7:05 p.m., "Grant's in a bad mood today. I'll check on him. Should be quick." 8:11 p.m. Gideon, go ahead and eat. Don't wait for me. 9:17 p.m. I'll make it up to you when I get back. Be good. Sir, would you like me to light the candles? The girl wore the restaurant's black vest and held a lighter, standing quietly by my table. I looked at the cake and nodded. She lingered for a moment, probably noticing I still hadn't blown out the candles, then softly reminded me, Sir, the candles are about to melt down. I made a small sound, still unmoving. She hesitated, then asked, would you like me to help blow them out? Otherwise the frosting might get dripped on by wax. I finally looked up at her. Her eyes were clear, with no hint of curiosity or judgment, just genuinely asking a work-like question. I smiled. Can you? She nodded. Yes. Make a wish first. I closed my eyes for a moment, didn't make a wish, and said, go ahead. She leaned over and gently blew. The candles went out. At nearby tables, people laughed and joked. Some were taking photos, and the faint accompaniment of the birthday song leaked from the next private room. Messy and chaotic. She removed the candles and placed them on the tray, whispering, Happy birthday. I looked at her and suddenly said, Thank you. She was just turning away when I called her back. Wait a second. I pushed over the untouched second meal. I can't finish this. Can you pack it up for me? Sure. And the cake, cut it in half. The other half, if your kitchen doesn't mind, you can share it. She looked a little surprised. Are you sure? I nodded. Yeah, I'm sure. By 10:30 p.m., I carried the takeout boxes home. When I opened the door, the living room lights were off. Only the bedroom was lit. Hannah was sitting on the edge of the bed, removing her makeup, without even turning around. You're back. I just finished my shower, I murmured, and placed the boxes on the table. Seeing the cake box, her tone softened immediately. Oh, you're really upset. I told you I'd make it up to you. Grant's in a bad state today. I can't just ignore him, right? I looked at her calmly. If he's not doing well, you go keep him company. What about my birthday? When are you going to keep me company? She frowned. What do you mean by that? Literally what I said. Gideon, don't keep dragging this on. I've explained it to you. I nodded. Explained. She tossed the cotton pad aside, her tone rising. And why are you getting more sarcastic lately? Grant is just a friend. Isn't it fun to obsess over him every day? I didn't respond and turned to the kitchen to pour some water. She continued from behind. You weren't like this before. You're really exhausting me now. I held the cup, glanced back at her, and suddenly smiled. All right, then you get some rest. She froze. That's your reaction? What reaction do you want from me? At least say something. If I say it, will you even listen? Her mouth opened, but no words came out. I grabbed my laptop and charger from the bedroom and went to the study, closing the door behind me. The moment the door shut, I heard her mutter quietly in the living room. Crazy. I sat in the study chair, staring at the screen blankly for 5 minutes, before opening WeChat and messaging Morrow. The smart control project you mentioned last time. I'm in. Let's schedule a time to talk in person tomorrow. He replied almost immediately. Bro, you finally came around. I stared at the message and replied with one word. Chapter 3. Over the next week, Hannah clearly sensed that something was off with me. Before, if she came home late, I would ask about it. Now, I just said, leave your shoes by the door. Don't trip. Before, if she said Grant had contacted her, I would frown. Now, I only said, go ahead. Be careful on the way. She was starting to feel unaccustomed to this. That morning, she blocked the kitchen door and asked me, Gideon, are you upset? I was frying eggs. No. Then why have you been so cold lately? Have I? Can't you feel it yourself? I flipped the eggs, turned down the heat, keeping my tone flat. Haven't you always complained that I interfere too much? Now I'm not interfering. Isn't that just fine? She choked up a little, staring at me for a few seconds. Do you think this is funny? I plated the eggs and handed them to her. Eat while it's hot. Cold eggs smell fishy. She didn't take them, her tone sharper. What exactly do you want? I smiled slightly. Hannah, I'm not thinking about anything. You do your thing. I'll do mine. She set the plate on the table. Fine. Keep pretending then. That night, she sent me a message. Grant invited me to dinner today. I might be home late. I replied. Okay. 10 minutes later, she sent just an okay. I saw the message but didn't reply. Half an hour later, she called directly. What do you mean by that? Mean by what? I'm giving you a heads up, and this is your attitude. I leaned against the window, watching the car lights downstairs. What attitude do you expect me to have? At least ask. Who else? Where? And what time will you be back? Haven't you already said all that? Would asking make a difference? She was silent for 2 seconds, her voice growing cold. Gideon, you're really acting strange right now, I softly said. Maybe, I added. Chapter 4. 3 days later, there was an industry networking cocktail event. Hannah insisted that I attend, saying, "It wouldn't look right if you didn't show up." So I went. During the introductions, the host asked her to introduce the people around her. She looked at Grant first, her smile bright and radiant. "This is Grant, a friend I've known since childhood. We'll be working closely together in the future." Only then did she turn to me, her smile noticeably dimmer. "This is my boyfriend, Gideon. He's usually pretty low-key and doesn't get involved in the business side of things." The audience applauded politely. I heard someone in the back whisper, "Got it, a kept man." When it was time for toasts, Grant patted me on the shoulder. "Gideon, Hannah can't really hold her liquor. Why don't you drink this one for her?" I removed his hand from my shoulder and smiled. "Wouldn't it make more sense for you to do it? Weren't you two childhood friends?" The air instantly went silent. Hannah's face darkened on the spot. Tugging at my sleeve, she whispered, "Stop acting crazy here." I glanced down at her hand and slowly pulled my sleeve away. "I'm not acting crazy. I just suddenly realized that you're right." "What?" "I really don't belong in your business world." After saying that, I set my glass back on the table and walked away. The moment I reached the parking lot, my phone vibrated. Hannah was calling. I answered, and the first thing she said was, "Gideon, have you had enough of this nonsense yet? I'm not making a scene. You deliberately embarrassed me today." I smiled. "Did I? I thought you were pretty used to situations like that." "What do you mean?" "When you introduced him, your eyes lit up. When you introduced me, it sounded like you were reading a disclaimer." "Hannah, have you really not noticed the problem?" The line went quiet for a few seconds. When she spoke again, her tone was even harder. "Grant is just a childhood friend. How many times do I have to tell you that?" Looking at my reflection in the car window, I replied softly, "You can tell me 10,000 times if you want, but what you say is one thing, what you do is another." She let out a cold laugh. "Wow, now you're giving lectures." "It's not a lecture, it's a boundary." "Then break up with me if you've got the guts." The moment those words landed, all my hesitation vanished. I nodded. "Okay." She sounded like she couldn't process it. What? "You hurt me." I hung up. Then I sent her a message. "Hannah, we're broken up. I'll pack up the things you left at my place this weekend. Leave the key with property management and don't come knocking on my door late at night anymore." After sending it, I put my phone on silent and started the car. The instant the headlights came on, I suddenly remembered what that young waitress had said after blowing out the candle a few days earlier. "Happy birthday." Strangely enough, she had only said a few words, yet they felt more sincere than most of the things I'd heard throughout this entire relationship. I thought that once I sent the message, everything would be over. But the next day at noon, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Hannah was standing there with red eyes, holding a cup of coffee from my favorite cafe. Her first words weren't, "Let's talk," nor were they, "I'm sorry." Instead, "Gideon, are you really breaking up with me?" I looked at her and was about to answer when the kitchen timer behind me dinged. The soup on the stove had just reached a boil. I turned around, switched off the heat, and when I faced her again, I said only one word, "Yes." Hannah remained standing there. The coffee in her hand was still hot, condensation covering the cup. I glanced at the time, 12:08 p.m. I had a meeting at 2 p.m. "Come in and let's talk," I said, stepping aside. After entering, the first thing she did was place the coffee in the seat where I usually sat. The second thing she did was head to the kitchen and open the cabinets as if she owned the place. Looking for a cup, I didn't stop her. After pouring herself some water, she turned to me. "Are you really doing this? Just because of Grant?" "Yes." I looked at her. "Because whenever you and Grant are together, I always feel like the backup option." She pressed her lips together, her tone softening slightly. "I admit I've gone a little too far lately, but you can't just break up with me out of nowhere." I nodded. "I can." Her anger flared immediately. "Gideon, you're unbelievable. 4 years together, and you're just throwing it away. Aren't you the same?" I smiled faintly. 4 years together, and you had no problem pushing me aside. That left her speechless. She didn't say anything for a long while. I pushed an envelope across the coffee table. "Your spare key, your access card, and the earring you left here last time are all inside. I'll pack up your clothes and cosmetics this weekend." She stared at the envelope as her eyes slowly reddened. "You already sorted all this out?" "Yes. You've been thinking about breaking up for a long time, haven't you?" My tone remained calm. "You simply gave me enough opportunities to think it through." Clenching her teeth, she grabbed the envelope and stood up to leave, but at the door, she turned back. "Gideon, don't regret this." I nodded. "Yeah, I won't." The door slammed shut. I stood there without moving. A few seconds later, I walked over and poured out the unfinished coffee she had left behind. Chapter 5. She thought I was just throwing a tantrum. During the first week after the breakup, Hannah messaged me every day, "Have you eaten? The temperature dropped today. Don't wear clothes that are too thin." I bought that cake from your favorite bakery and left it at your door. I didn't reply to any of them. In the second week, she changed tactics. My mom asked why you haven't come over for dinner. This is really immature of you. Can we handle this like adults? I still didn't reply. By the third week, she called me directly. I answered. And the first thing she said was, "How long are you going to keep this up?" I was revising a proposal on my computer, my eyes never leaving the screen. I'm not keeping anything up. You don't reply to messages. You don't answer calls. If that's not throwing a tantrum, what is? It's called cutting ties. Her voice immediately rose. Gideon, do you really have to be this heartless? I stopped typing and leaned back in my chair. Hannah, not staying in contact after a breakup is called common sense, not being heartless. There was a 2-second silence on the other end before she suddenly said, "Fine, then let's meet one last time. Let's clear everything up." There's no need. There is. She stressed every word. If you don't come, I'll go to your office and find you. I thought about it for a moment. 7 o'clock tonight. The usual place. Okay. The usual place was the restaurant where I had spent my birthday. I arrived exactly at 7. Hannah walked in at 7:20. The first thing she said after sitting down was, "About your birthday." "I'm sorry." I simply responded with an waiting for her to continue. Seeing my reaction, she visibly panicked and hurried to explain. "I didn't mean to stand you up." Grant was really in a bad state that day. She stared at me, her voice trembling. "Can't you give me one more chance?" Before I could answer, her phone rang. Caller ID, Grant. She glanced at me and declined the call. 3 seconds later, it rang again. She declined it again. When it rang for the third time, she stood up. "I'll step outside and take this. I'll be right back." I smiled. "Go ahead. I'll really be right back." She turned and jogged out. Watching her leave, I suddenly felt nothing at all. I raised my hand and called over a waitress. It was the same young woman from that day. Her name tag read, Carmen. When she saw me, she froze for a second before softly asking, "Sir, dining alone again today?" I nodded. Not originally, but soon. She took a moment to understand but didn't ask any questions. "Would you like to order first?" "No, just bring me the bill." She looked surprised. "But you haven't ordered anything yet. Think of it as a reservation fee." She lowered her head and worked the register. After a moment, she handed me the receipt. "All set." I took the receipt. Just as I stood up to leave, Hannah came back from outside. Her expression didn't look good. The moment she saw me heading toward the door, she panicked. "Where are you going?" "Home. Didn't I say I'd be right back?" "You did come back." I looked at her, but I've already moved on. She froze where she stood, her eyes instantly turning red. I didn't stop. I pushed open the door and walked out. Chapter 6. The first layer of truth. After that night, I thought at least she would tone it down a bit, but she didn't. The next morning, she sent a long message. "Yesterday, something came up with Grant at the last minute. I really didn't mean to interrupt our conversation. Can you stop assuming the worst about everything? I've known him since childhood. I can't ignore it when he has problems, but that doesn't mean I don't care about you." I read it and replied with a few words. "Good that he's okay." She replied instantly. "Can you stop being so passive-aggressive?" I didn't respond again. At the same time, my own projects were moving smoothly. Morrow asked me to meet an investor. We talked for 3 hours and finalized a preliminary term sheet on the spot. When leaving the conference room, he patted my shoulder. "You bounced back pretty quickly." I smiled. Reality gave me a lesson. I'm clear-headed now. Heartbreak in love. Success in business. "When did you say that?" He laughed out loud. "Come on. Let's celebrate tonight." I shook my head. "Not tonight. I still have a contract to review. You weren't like this before." Before is before. That evening, I was at home reading the contract when Hannah called again. I hung up. She called again. Hung up again. I answered the third call to stop her constant barrage. "Speak." Hearing that I answered, her tone softened. "Gideon, I know you're still angry. How about this? I'll turn off my phone this weekend. See no one. Just be with you." "Okay." I flipped through the contract. "No need." "Why not?" "Because we broke up." She was silent for a few seconds, then suddenly asked, "Do you have someone else?" I couldn't help but laugh from annoyance. "Your logic jumps a bit. Then why did you change so fast?" "I didn't change fast. I just realized things late." She tried to speak again, but another call came through. "Morrow." I switched straight to it. "Hello, Mr. Morrow." Hannah froze for a moment when she heard Mr. Morrow. "You're busy with work?" she asked. What exactly have you been busy with lately?" "Busy with my own matters. You used to hate socializing for business. People change." I hung up after saying that. 3 days later, I went to a cafe to meet a client. While ordering, I heard someone call my name, "Mr. Gideon." I turned around. It was Carmen. She wasn't in her uniform, just a simple white shirt and jeans, holding a laptop as if she was doing some part-time spreadsheet work. What a coincidence. I said. She smiled. I work the day shift here. Do you want a latte or an Americano? You remember? On your birthday, you ordered an Americano. No sugar. I nodded. Then the usual. While preparing the order, she asked, how have you been lately? Pretty good, I said with a smile. That's good. Such a simple sentence, but it felt pleasant. No probing, no judgment, no taking sides. I had just received the coffee when my phone lit up. Hannah, where are you? I'm downstairs at your office, I replied. Not there. She instantly sent a voice message. Voice controlled but edged with frustration. Are you deliberately avoiding me? I thought for a moment and replied, not avoiding, just not seeing. After sending it, I placed the phone face down on the table and continued discussing client needs. Chapter 7. That night at 11. That night at 11, I returned home and saw Hannah's car parked at the entrance of the community. She was sitting in the driver's seat, the lights off, still inside the car. As I walked by, she rolled down the window. Gideon, come up. Just 2 minutes. I want to say something to you. I stopped and looked at her. She bit her lip, as if holding back for a long time before finally speaking. Grant asked me today if you're still throwing a tantrum. I said nothing. She continued. I told him you were just upset temporarily, and it would pass. I looked at her and felt a small urge to laugh. Hannah, you still think I'm throwing a tantrum? She frowned. If not, then what? 4 years together, and I can just end it like that. Possible. Possible. I don't believe it. Then keep not believing. I turned to walk away. She panicked, got out of the car, and grabbed my wrist. Gideon, can you not do this? I've been really exhausted lately. I looked down at her hand holding mine and gently freed it. Your exhaustion is your business, not a reason for me to turn back. Her eyes instantly reddened. Why are you speaking so harshly now? I wasn't harsh before, and you treated me like a pushover. She opened her mouth but didn't say anything for a long while. I swiped my access card and entered the building. The elevator doors closed, but she was still standing outside, watching me. In her eyes were hurt, anger, and a little bit of panic even she wasn't willing to admit. The next day at noon, I received a very short message from her. Gideon, next week I have one last favor to ask. Help me this one last time, then I won't bother you again. I stared at the words one last time for a long moment, then replied, what favor? She sent a voice message. Her voice was soft, but it instantly wiped the smile off my face. Grant wants to buy a house, but his bank statements are a little off. Can you pretend to get back together with me for a month to help him secure the loan? I finished listening, set the phone on the table. The sunlight outside was bright, yet I felt freezing cold. The real drama had finally arrived. I played Hannah's voice message again. Grant wants to buy a house, but his bank statements are a little off. Can you pretend to get back together with me for a month to help him secure the loan? I stared at the screen for 10 seconds, then replied, 8 o'clock tonight, coffee shop downstairs. Bring Grant with you. She almost instantly replied, okay. At exactly 8 that evening, I entered the shop. Hannah was already there. Grant sat beside her, and 2 cups of coffee were on the table. I had just sat down when Grant smiled and said, Gideon, thanks for this. It's really just a procedure. At most a month. Once the loan is approved, it won't involve you anymore. I nodded. Explain exactly how we'll do it. Hannah hurried to explain. We just temporarily change our relationship status in the system to stable dating. Then use your bank statements as proof of shared repayment ability. After the house is secured, we change it back. I smiled slightly. You call this a fake reconciliation? Yes. She looked perfectly reasonable. We're not really getting back together. It's just in the system. Whose name goes on the house? Grant answered. Hannah's for now. We'll discuss later. Who pays the down payment? I'll cover part of it. Hannah will cover the rest. Who repays the mortgage? He paused. Well, we'll see. I leaned back in my chair, looking at the two of them. Fine. It can be done, but under my rules. Hannah's eyes lit up. You agreed. Don't celebrate yet. Listen first. I held up 3 fingers. 3 conditions. First, a tripartite agreement. You, Hannah, Grant, and me. It must clearly state, I'm only lending my financial credentials temporarily, not the actual buyer, and I assume no repayment responsibility. Second, notarization. If payment is overdue by more than 15 days, you two jointly cover all my financial losses, including credit damage, penalties, and legal fees. Third, a security deposit. Grant deposits $200,000 into an escrow account first, not for me, but to prevent either of you from backing out later. After I finished, the table went silent. Grant forced a smile. A little stiff. Gideon, we're all friends here. Do we need to make this so ugly? Friends? I looked at him. You want me to risk my financial statements for your house, and you call us friends? Hannah frowned. Gideon, aren't you exaggerating? We're just borrowing your statements for a month. What's the point of an agreement then? She was cornered by me, her tone hardening. Can't you stop being so calculating? I nodded. Fine, then I won't be calculating. Find someone else. I got up to leave. Hannah immediately grabbed my sleeve. Don't go. Let's talk it through. I freed her hand. I'm talking it through. If you don't want to follow the rules, don't do it. Grant sighed beside us. Fine, I'll think it over. I checked the time and turned to leave. As I stepped out, I heard Hannah mutter under her breath, "Can't you be a little softer?" I didn't look back. Chapter 8. She wanted me to talk about feelings. I only talked about contracts. The next afternoon, Hannah sent me a simplified version of the agreement. I opened it and found that the core message could be summed up in one sentence. Party A, Gideon, voluntarily provides assistance and waives all rights of recovery. I laughed out loud. This wasn't simplification. This was asking me to jump into a pit myself. I forwarded the document to Carmen. We'd exchanged contact information after running into each other a few more times. Can you take a look when you have time? She replied quickly. I do. Who wrote this? It looks like a bunch of templates stitched together. There are risk issues everywhere. I typed. The other side wants me to sign a slavery contract. She sent back a. Literally. 5 minutes later, she sent me a list of revisions. Everything was organized clearly, with all the key risk points highlighted. At the end, she added, if you sign this because you're soft-hearted, it'll become a huge problem later. Helping someone is one thing. Helping them until you're the one drowning in debt is another. I stared at that sentence for a moment and replied, received. Attorney Carmen. She sent back a laughing through tears emoji. Just a side gig. Don't flatter me. That evening, I sent the revised agreement to Hannah. She called almost instantly. The moment I answered, she sounded anxious. Gideon, what do you mean by this? Why did you even get a lawyer involved? I didn't get a lawyer. I got common sense. This version is way too harsh. Grant will never agree to it. Then he doesn't have to do it. Are you deliberately making things difficult for him? No, I'm managing risk. You asked me for help, and I've already provided a solution. Whether you take it or not is your choice. She was silent for a few seconds before her voice softened. Then, can you do me a favor and sign first? We can sort out the rest later. My tone remained calm. Hannah, you no longer have the privilege of asking me to sign first and talk later. The line stayed silent for a long time. Finally, she dropped one sentence. You've changed. Then she hung up. Chapter 9. The bank meeting. The moment everything fell apart. 3 days later, Hannah still sent me the appointment time for the bank interview. Thursday, 10 a.m. South City branch. Please come, I'm begging you. I went. Not because I'd softened. Because I wanted to see how far they were willing to take the act. Inside the bank's meeting room, the account manager spread the documents across the table one by one. I had just turned to the page labeled, Joint Repayment Liability, when Grant spoke. Gideon, let's stick to what we discussed before. We can skip that tripartite agreement. Right. It feels too formal between friends. I looked up at him. When did I ever say we could skip it? Hannah immediately jumped in. Gideon, let's just get the loan approved today. We can sign the agreement afterward. Okay. I looked at her without saying a word. Under my gaze, she visibly lost confidence, her voice softening. Just this once, please. I set my pen down and pushed it to the center of the table. Then today's meeting ends here. The account manager froze. Mr. Gideon, are you saying? I withdraw my authorization and will not act as a joint borrower. I stood up, leaving every document behind. I turned and walked out. Hannah chased after me and grabbed my arm in the lobby. Are you crazy? Do you realize standing us up today could affect the credit approval process? I stopped and turned to look at her. The people affected are you two, not me. You really can't stand seeing Grant succeed, can you? I laughed and nodded. That's right. I can't stand taking on financial risk for him anymore. Is that the answer you wanted? She was so angry her eyes turned red, her voice trembling. Gideon, you were never like this before. That's right. I smiled faintly. Before, I was stupid. After saying that, I walked down the steps and got straight into my car. Chapter 10. She wanted me to talk about feelings. I only talked about contracts. That night, Hannah rushed over to my place. When I opened the door, her face was streaked with tears. The first thing she said was, "Can you stop taking things so far?" I stepped aside to let her in. We can talk, but don't shout. She stood in the center of the living room, still clutching the bank statement in her hand, crumpled into a ball. Grant almost got treated like a fraud at the bank today. Do you know how humiliating that was for him? I looked at her and asked, "Have you ever seen me embarrassed?" She froze. Does it matter now? Yes, I nodded. Because now you finally understand what embarrassment feels like. She gritted her teeth. I really misjudged you. Same here. Shaking with anger, she suddenly said what she had been holding back. Grant has always treated me well. Helping him is the right thing to do. You can't compare to him. The living room went silent. I stared at her for a few seconds, then slowly nodded. I know. She seemed to realize she'd gone too far and immediately tried to soften her tone. I didn't mean it like that. I'm just saying you two are different. You don't need to explain. I interrupted her. I walked to the entryway and opened the door. Hannah, starting today, you don't need to come to my place anymore. I will keep your contact info, but only for handling financial matters, nothing else. She stood still. Are you going to block me? No. I looked at her. Blocking is too emotional. I will keep evidence, boundaries, and distance. Tears fell from her eyes. Do you really have to be like this? Yes, I do. She walked to the door and turned back, her voice barely audible. Gideon, is it really over between us? After the door closed, I stood there for a few seconds before turning back to the living room. The coffee table still held the tissues she hadn't taken, damp and clumped together. I looked at them and tossed them in the trash. I thought that would be the end. But on Saturday night, at a reunion with old classmates, I had just stepped into the private room when I heard Hannah inside say, Gideon has already agreed to help Grant. The loan will be approved soon. The whole table oohed in excitement. Grant sat beside her, smiling smugly. I stayed at the door, not going in, and tapped the doorframe. Everyone turned, and the atmosphere immediately froze. I walked to the table, set down my phone, and said calmly, let me correct something. First, Hannah and I have not gotten back together. Second, I will not act as a guarantor for Grant. Third, the $128,000 that Hannah withdrew from our joint account must be returned within 3 days. If overdue, I will report it to the police. The entire room went silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Hannah's face went pale. What are you talking about? I borrowed it first. Borrowed. I looked at her. Is there an IOU? Did I agree to this? She opened her mouth but couldn't say a word. A long time ago, I had given her a card, and I'd forgotten to retrieve it. Grant stood up, trying to smooth things over. Gideon, we're all friends here. Don't be so rigid. I smiled faintly. You're right. Then we'll speak according to the law, not friendship. I picked up my phone and turned to leave. Behind me, I heard Hannah's restrained crying. Gideon, do you have to do this in public? I didn't respond or stop. That night at home, 2 messages popped up on my phone simultaneously. Hannah sent a 60-second voice message. Carmen sent one line, the funding passed. Sign the contract Monday at 10 a.m. Congratulations. Exactly. I had brought her over. Such talent should never be relegated to being a waitress. I looked at the messages for 2 seconds, opened Carmen's first, and replied, got it. See you Monday. Then I put my phone down and went to the kitchen to boil water. I didn't open Hannah's voice message. I only listened to that 60-second message the next morning. Hannah's voice was hoarse. The first 20 seconds were all crying. After that, just a few broken sentences. Gideon, I've gathered the money. Please don't report me. I know I was wrong. I didn't mean to take money from your account. Please just reply, okay. I'm begging you. I listened, turned off the screen, brushed my teeth, washed my face, changed clothes, and left. It wasn't that I was cold-hearted. It was that I had finally learned one thing. If an emotion isn't yours, don't take it on. Chapter 11. The signing on Monday went smoothly. Halfway through the meeting, my assistant walked in and handed me a note. Boss, there's someone downstairs asking to see you. Her name is Hannah. She says she'll only take 3 minutes. I glanced at the time and nodded. Tell her to wait. After the meeting, I went downstairs. Hannah was standing in a corner of the lobby, holding a paper bag. As soon as I approached, she handed it to me. This is the durian milk crepe cake you used to love. I waited in line for an hour. I didn't take it. If you have something to say it. Her hand froze in midair before she slowly pulled it back. Her eyes reddened. I've already paid you back. I fixed the account records too. Did you see it? I did. Then, are you still angry? I looked at her calmly. Hannah, I stopped being angry a long time ago. She froze. Isn't that a good thing? It is. I nodded. Because not being angry means not caring anymore. The words were like a dull blade, cutting slowly and deeply. Her face instantly turned pale. Gideon, I really understand now. I went too far. I thought you'd always be there. See, I interrupted. You said it yourself. You thought I'd always be there. That's the problem. She lowered her head. Tears fell one by one onto the paper bag. Then, is there still a chance? No, you won't even try. I already tried for 4 years. I looked at her. That's enough. She stood there, as if all her strength had suddenly drained away. Just before I turned to leave, she asked quietly from behind me, Gideon, did you stop loving me a long time ago? I paused for 2 seconds. I didn't turn around. I walked out of the lobby. The glass doors closed behind me. She didn't follow. Chapter 12. Another half-month passed when Grant called me. I intended to hang up, but accidentally answered instead. Gideon, can we meet? I want to apologize for everything that happened. Not necessary. Come on. Just 5 minutes. I'm at the coffee shop across from your office. I hung up. 5 minutes later, he sent me a photo. Hannah was sitting across from him. She had obviously been crying. Then a voice message arrived. If you don't come, she'll keep misunderstanding me. Can you really live with that? I stared at those words for a few seconds and laughed. Even at the very end, he was still using other people as bargaining chips. I went. I wanted to watch the show. The moment I entered the cafe, Hannah's eyes lit up. You came. Grant spoke before she could continue. Gideon, I only have one thing to say. Maybe I was wrong about some things, but you two ending up like this can't all be blamed on me. We're adults. Everyone makes their own choices. I placed my phone on the table and played an audio recording. It was a voice message he had sent to a friend while drunk. His voice was unmistakably clear. Hannah's the easiest type to manipulate. Give her a little emotional validation and she'll hand over money. And honest guys like Gideon are the most useful. Using his financial qualifications is cheaper than hiring a guarantor company. When the recording ended, the table fell completely silent. Grant's face changed instantly. Where did you get that? The source doesn't matter. I looked at him. The content does. Hannah's hands trembled violently. She stared at Grant. Is that true? Grant immediately tried to explain. Hannah, listen to me. I was drunk that day. Hannah shoved over her cup. Coffee spilled across the table. She stood up, her voice shaking. Shut up. Then she turned toward me. Tears streamed endlessly down her face. Gideon, I was wrong. I didn't respond to those words. Instead, I said, your life is yours to clean up. I came today to give you the evidence, not to give myself back to you. I stood and walked away. As I reached the door, she shouted my name behind me. Her voice cracked from crying. Gideon, I really know I was wrong. I paused briefly. Still, I didn't turn around. Knowing you're wrong is enough, but not every mistake comes with a second chance. Chapter 13. That week at the end of the year, the project went live, and the team had pulled 3 all-nighters. At 1 a.m., I left the office and saw Carmen still at her desk, editing designs. 2 bowls of takeout wontons sat on the table. I walked over. You're still here? Without looking up, she said, you're not gone either. Whose are these 2 bowls? Yours and mine. She pushed one toward me. Eat it while it's hot. Don't upset your stomach again. I picked up a spoon. How did you know my stomach would hurt? She finally looked up, a small smile in her eyes. Whenever you're stressed, your right hand keeps pressing your stomach. You think nobody notices? I paused, then smiled down, observant. No choice. I'm a product manager. I notice details. I sipped the soup. The warmth went down my throat and relaxed me a little. She watched me and suddenly asked, have you been having insomnia lately? Not really. Lying again. She placed a small box of melatonin by my hand. Don't push yourself. Also, no overtime this weekend. I scheduled you a physical therapy session. I raised an eyebrow. Manager Carmen, is this employee care or personal care? Her ears flushed slightly, but she kept her tone firm. Depends on your behavior. I smiled. Then I'll perform accordingly. How? First, I'll take you home, then come back to revise the plan. She rolled her eyes. Are you insane? Running back and forth at this hour? Then I won't revise the plan. I'll just take you home. Even worse, we have a testing submission tomorrow morning. She finished speaking and laughed, tapping the bowl with her spoon. All right, enough jokes. Eat. Later, when we were together, there weren't any big dramatic moments. One weekend, I waited downstairs for her. She came down, and her first words were, you're not wearing that thin coat today. Too scared of your scolding. I raised the thermos in my hand. Brought ginger tea too. She lowered her head and smiled, reaching for it. Nice. Live longer. Is that a blessing or a curse? Both. We walked side by side. The wind was a little cold, but our hands were warm. Chapter 14. 1 year later, at our engagement banquet, Carmen and I were on stage when the MC said, please exchange rings. A stir came from the door. I glanced up. Hannah was standing behind the crowd, not causing a scene, not shouting. She was just watching from afar, her eyes red. Carmen gently squeezed my hand and whispered, do you want to go say hello? I looked at her for a few seconds and shook my head. No need. Are you sure? Yes. It wasn't hate, and it wasn't fear. It was understanding at last that the most dignified closure for a relationship is simply not to interfere anymore. I turned my gaze back and placed the ring on Carmen's finger. She placed mine on and then looked up at me, smiling. Gideon, please take care of me for the rest of my life. I smiled back. Manager Carmen, looking forward to our continued cooperation. The audience cheered. She blushed and kicked me lightly. Can't you say something normal? I leaned close to her ear. Then let me put it another way. What? From now on, you don't need to ask if I want to help blow out the candle. I want to celebrate my birthday with you every year. She paused. Then her eyes curved into a smile. Deal. I held her hand tight. Applause filled the room, the lights shining bright. This time, I didn't look back, and I didn't need to.